The chapter opens on a frozen battlefield buried beneath falling snow. A lone man stands tall amid a mound of corpses, their blood staining the white ground beneath them. After a moment, he turns and notices a black-haired young man behind him, clearly caught off guard. The older man calmly wonders why Ash is standing there at all, reminding him that he was meant to be away on a subjugation mission. The young man's face is wounded, yet his gaze remains steady and resolute. He answers that he has come for one purpose only, to bring the man before him down. In response to this declaration, the blond man shows no sign of alarm. He remains composed, almost indifferent, as though the threat means nothing to him. The younger man then accuses him of using people as tools, only to cast them aside once they have outlived their usefulness. Rage burns in his eyes as he addresses him as his father, revealing the bond between them. The older man responds coldly, stating that such manipulation is the natural role of someone like him and dismissing the young man as a foolish son. In that moment, the name of the protagonist is revealed: Aster A. Elmheim, a young man resolved to defy the fate imposed upon him. The scene shifts to the crest of House Elmheim, a noble family feared and revered for its overwhelming strength. Known as the most powerful martial house on the continent, they have sworn their loyalty to the royal family. At their head stands Lord Roderick, the only man in the kingdom said to possess the 7 wings. Long ago, he once saved a young boy from freezing to death in a blizzard, acting on nothing more than a passing whim. Bound by that act, the boy devoted himself entirely to Roderick, obeying every command without question. Yet his life within the house was harsh. He was constantly belittled and treated as lesser. In one memory, he recalls standing with a broken wooden sword while other boys mocked him, telling him not to grow arrogant simply because he had been allowed to stay. The wing crest engraved upon his back symbolized magical potential, but cruel irony followed him. He was the only one in the house who could not use magic at all. For this reason, even his own brothers tormented him, sneering and calling him wingless. Still, despite the endless scorn, he refused to surrender. He trained relentlessly, gripping his sword and pushing forward no matter how much it hurt. He drove his body to exhaustion, performing push-ups in pouring rain and forcing himself past his limits. He believed that unwavering devotion would eventually earn him recognition. The memory shifts again, showing him in a snow-covered forest alongside his companions. Sensing something wrong, the young man suddenly hides behind a tree, alert to an unfamiliar presence drawing closer. Shock washes over him when he realizes their group has been surrounded, and he wonders if they have fallen into an ambush. The scene snaps back to the present as he confronts his father, demanding to know whether his loyalty meant anything at all after such betrayal. Roderick responds with disdain, stating that someone like Aster should never have harbored expectations, and declaring that his role has ended. Hatred and bitterness twist across the young man's face at those words. Without hesitation, he charges forward, sword raised, determined to strike down the man who discarded him so easily. As he attacks, he admits that he was foolish to place his faith in someone like his father. He pours everything into the blow, condemning his own naivete even as the strike lands. Yet the result is pitiful. Roderick barely reacts, suffering nothing more than a shallow cut across his face. In an instant, 2 figures appear and bind Aster with chains formed of magical energy. They are his brothers. Without mercy, they assault him with glowing red swords, cutting into him as he struggles helplessly. Pain rips through his body as he cries out, trapped and unable to defend himself against their ruthless strikes. One brother sneers that someone without wings will always remain wingless. As Aster lies beaten in the snow, the 3 loom over him, one of them remarking that such a position suits him well. Weak and shaking, he asks why his father ever took him in if he planned to throw him away in the end. Roderick kneels before him and coldly tells him not to fool himself, stating that he was never useful as a person. Grabbing him by the hair, he forces Aster to look up, his gaze filled with contempt. He explains that the only thing he ever needed was the power of the 7 wings sleeping within the boy. Stunned, Aster cannot comprehend what the 7 wings truly are. Roderick then reveals that the boy's mother had been valuable to him for reasons far darker than affection. He explains that she carried what he needed, a seed meant to further his selfish ambition for greater power. Desperation overtakes the young man as he stretches his hand across the snow, trying to stop his father from walking away. His effort is meaningless. Hatred roars within his thoughts as he demands answers, but none come. All he feels is the icy snow against his stiffening fingers, his eyes empty and lost. He wonders if this moment marks the end of his path. He questions the meaning of his life and what purpose all his suffering ever served. Then, suddenly, everything fades into a warm, blinding white. Seeing snow once more, he wonders if he has crossed into the afterlife. He finds himself held in someone's arms, confused and unable to grasp what is happening. His eyes widen as he realizes this is no dream, it is real. He wonders where he is, feeling the cold air against his skin as he lies exposed in the snow. Looking down, he notices that his body is far too small. He raises a tiny hand, questioning whether it truly belongs to him. Slowly, the truth dawns on him. This is not merely a small body. It is the body of a newborn child. His gaze shifts to the woman holding him, and he realizes with horror that she is lifeless. Voices suddenly ring out nearby. and he sees a golden gleam in someone's eyes as orders are shouted. Men on horseback scour the blizzard, desperately searching for the woman. Their leader commands them to recover the baby she supposedly took for Roderick. Hearing that name sends a shock through him as understanding begins to form. He realizes that Roderick was searching for a baby and that he himself is that child. He questions whether the infant suspended in this moment is truly him. Memories surface of being found in a blizzard, and he understands the impossible truth. He has returned to the past. Golden light surrounds him as his sense of reality fractures and reshapes. Finding the situation absurd yet undeniable, he decides confirmation can wait. He knows one thing for certain: if he remains here, he will fall back into the Duke's grasp. Gathering what little strength he has, the newborn turns away from the lifeless woman and begins to crawl through the snow, driven by a determination far greater than his fragile body suggests. Golden light wraps around him, and he realizes that escape is his only option. His tiny hand begins to shine as he drags himself forward through the biting snow. Almost immediately his breath grows uneven, and he lets out a strained sound, frustrated by lungs that refuse to work as they should. Every movement sends burning pain through his small limbs, and a clear trail forms behind him in the snow. Despite a past filled with humiliation and obedience, the boy swears to himself that he will not die here. A vision of his grim future flashes through his mind, showing his hand reaching toward Roderick in anger and despair. His face tightens with pure hatred as he makes a silent vow to take revenge on Roderick. Even trapped in the fragile body of a newborn, he keeps crawling across the endless white expanse. Eventually, exhaustion overwhelms him, and he collapses unconscious just as his path is blocked by someone's feet. A small white-haired girl notices the baby lying in the snow and calls out to her father in alarm. In response, a gray-haired man steps forward. He is the Viscount of House Highfried. He lifts the child into his arms, wondering aloud what a baby could possibly be doing in such a deadly place. Held against the man's chest, the boy finally feels a sense of calm. The Viscount's eyes widen as he realizes how unbelievable the situation is, having never imagined finding an infant there. As he studies the child more closely, curiosity grows within him. He then notices the long trail carved through the snow and is stunned by how far the baby must have crawled alone. Meanwhile, the boy sleeps peacefully, his face unusually serene, in a dark, dreamlike space. The boy wonders where he is as the image of another child appears before him. A red-haired baby seems to welcome him, surrounded by drifting golden feathers. The scene shatters, and he wakes up abruptly in a crib, his thoughts lingering on something from the dream that he feels he must not use. As his vision clears, he notices children staring down at him. One of them scolds him, saying that he should not behave so wildly. Confusion overwhelms him as he realizes he is surrounded. A girl lifts him into her arms, but the black-haired boy struggles fiercely, desperate to break free. With a sudden burst of movement, he manages to leap from her grasp, shocking the other children. Without hesitation, he begins crawling away, panic etched across his face. One of the girls cries out for him to stop, startled by his behavior. He ignores her and continues his escape, unable to understand why he is being pursued. In desperation, he stretches out his hand, and golden energy surges from his body. His eyes blaze with the same radiant gold as a newly awakened magical aura surrounds him. To his shock, his body lifts off the ground. He realizes in disbelief that this is real magic. Still floating, he struggles to comprehend what is happening. Then the power suddenly fades, and he begins to fall uncontrollably from the air. Fear floods his face as he braces himself for the impact. Just before he hits the ground, the Viscount rushes in and catches him, struck once again by how strange and extraordinary the boy is. The child stares at the man in shock, recognizing him as the one who saved him before. He recalls that this man is Highfried, the Viscount ruling over Lodric's domain, land once governed by his father. As he glances at the mansion, he wonders if this is merely another branch of the Elmheim family. A portrait comes to mind, showing Highfried Mu-Elmheim, the head of the Viscount's house and a branch of the main family. He remembers that Highfried and his brother Lodric were known as the Two Wings, famed for protecting the royal family together. He also remembers their fate, how the Viscount and his entire family perished during a civil war. With this knowledge, the boy finally accepts the truth. He has truly returned to the past. This life is his second chance. Still, despair creeps in as he fears he may have escaped the Duke's grasp only to fall into the hands of his brother instead. A woman takes him into her arms and wonders aloud whether his magic went out of control, causing him to fly. She smiles gently, clearly pleased to finally have him there. She hugs him warmly and reassures him that he no longer needs to be afraid. The boy is left speechless by her kindness, unused to such affection. She continues to hold him with care, while the Viscount watches the scene quietly, deep in thought. After a moment, the Viscount extends his hand and states that the child possesses extraordinary power. To demonstrate, he lifts the boy's shirt, revealing a crest etched into his skin. Reflected in a nearby mirror, both the man and the woman stare in shock as they recognize the unmistakable symbol of the 7 wings. Panic surges through the boy as he sees the mark and wonders why it is there. His eyes glow intensely gold as memories flood back. He recalls Roderick's cold words about needing the power of the 7 wings that resided within him. An image flashes through his mind of his father holding him with a calculating, emotionless expression. At last, he understands the truth. He was taken in only so that his 7 wings could be claimed later. Anger burns through him as he questions how Roderick ever dared to call him wingless after stealing his own wings. The woman notices the sudden change in the child's expression and grows confused. She asks the Viscount what he plans to do with the boy she is holding. Hearing this, the child senses danger and knows he must be ready to act. He believes his power must never fall into the hands of the Elmheim family, as he needs it to carry out his revenge. To his complete surprise, the Viscount calmly states that they will adopt him. The decision is so unexpected that the boy is left utterly speechless. The Viscount gently pats the child's head and says that he is still a fledgling, unable to fly on his own. He explains that the boy needs guidance and protection, and he promises to care for him until the day he can truly fly. The child's eyes widen at the warmth and sincerity in those words. Suddenly, a small noise comes from behind the door as one of the girls collapses to the floor, having overheard everything. The Viscount realizes that all the children have been listening in secret. One of them admits that they were simply worried about the new baby. The children gather together and approach their mother, who is still holding the newest member of the family. She smiles down at the boy as another daughter steps closer, curious and gentle. With a calm, loving expression, the woman gazes at the child in her arms. She lifts him slightly and declares that his name will be Aster, like a newly born star within their family. 10 years pass. The grand mansion of the Viscount's house stands beneath a bright, cloudless sky. An older Lord Hyford is greeted by one of his subordinates at the entrance. Moments later, a confident, grown Aster steps down from a carriage, a sword resting at his waist. He offers his hand to a red-haired young woman, helping her descend as well and calling her his sister, Alphen. She thanks him warmly, reminding him of the days when she was one of the children who welcomed him into the family. The two walk side by side with serious expressions, Aster's focus fixed firmly ahead. They are heading toward the Sword Dance Assembly, a prestigious annual event hosted by a ducal family. It gathers noble martial houses from across the land, serving as both a showcase of strength and a battleground where each house tests its finest swordsmen in combat. The two siblings step into a gathering of young nobles, who are waiting for the event to begin. Almost immediately, quiet whispers ripple through the crowd. Several people cast sharp, judgmental glances toward the Viscount's family, speculating about the adopted boy whose origins are unknown. With thinly veiled malice, they wonder how far the Viscount intends to disgrace the Elmheim name by bringing such a child into public view. One noble openly points toward the young man's back, identifying him as the adopted son. His sister notices the stares and tells him not to pay attention to the poisonous remarks surrounding them. With her fist clenched, she adds that in a place like this, the weak are always crushed without mercy. The two stand shoulder to shoulder, their expressions firm and unyielding, prepared to face whatever hostility comes their way. Their father then explains that this cold reception reflects the Viscount family's standing among the nobility. He adds that he deliberately brought his adopted son here so he could witness this harsh reality for himself. With a grave expression, the Viscount asks whether the young man feels disappointed by how they are being treated. In response, the boy smiles confidently, his eyes bright, and states that he does not care about their indifference at all. Hearing this, the older man laughs in relief and pride, clearly reassured by his son's strength of character. In his previous life, Aster's first social debut ended in humiliation, marked by a crushing defeat in the arena. This place carries bitter memories for him, but now everything is different. With his 7 wings restored and golden eyes gleaming, he vows silently that no one will humiliate him again. The three of them proceed toward the grand hall where the event is being held, fully aware that trials await them inside. From a high window, 2 young nobles watch the Viscount family's arrival with open disdain. Though Aster senses the hostile gazes directed at him, he refuses to let them shake his composure. With steady steps they enter the hall, ready to announce their presence. Inside, Aster tells himself that this time his debut will be glorious. In an age ruled by knights, strength is the true measure of a noble's worth. Nearby, a light-haired young man is engaged in a fierce sword duel. Among nobles, power is judged by mastery of the blade and skill in battle. The arena represents the pinnacle of combat, where only the finest warriors prove themselves. To display majesty in battle is to demonstrate both personal renown and family honor. As the duel unfolds, the crowd watches intently, following every strike. The 2 swordsmen charge at one another in a swift clash, but above all symbols of strength stands the medal, an emblem possessed by only a rare few. With a precise strike, the light-haired swordsman disarms his opponent and claims victory. The red-haired young man stands frozen in disbelief, humiliated by his defeat before the crowd. The victor raises his sword, revealing the shining mark on his hand, the medal that signifies his authority and power. Watching from a private box, members of the Viscount's family comment that the atmosphere remains just as oppressive as ever. One of the girls remarks that she now understands why her other sisters refused to attend the festival. Aster's thoughts drift to his past life, to the bullies who once tormented him in this very place. Memories of his humiliating loss surge back, tightening his chest. His sister notices the shift in his expression and calls his name, concern evident in her voice. She asks whether he is nervous because this is his first sword dance assembly. He denies it, stating that what he feels is not nostalgia but disgust. His unexpected answer leaves her visibly confused. The Viscount then announces that he must attend a meeting and asks his son to keep an eye on his sister. She protests, insisting that she is the older one, but Aster teasingly remarks that she is clumsy. Before leaving, the Viscount advises him to use the opportunity to build connections, then quietly warns him to ensure that no one discovers the existence of the 7 wings. Once his father departs, Aster reflects that concealing such power will not be easy. All at once, he feels the collective hostility of the nobles in the hall focused on him. Letting out a quiet sigh, he thinks about how difficult it is to socialize in an environment so steeped in animosity. Even so, determination sharpens his gaze, his golden eyes shining with resolve. Seeing him walk off, his sister asks where he is going so suddenly. Calm and confident, he replies that he intends to make some friends. He approaches a group of young nobles lounging on a sofa. One red-haired boy notices him and rudely demands to know who he is. Unbothered, Aster introduces himself politely and addresses him as Brother Dallas. He calmly states his full name, Aster F. Elmheim, and explains that he is his younger brother. Dallas reacts with surprise, and Aster adds that he noticed him from afar and decided to greet him. Another noble informs Dallas that this is the boy adopted by the Viscount's family. With visible disdain, Dallas remarks that this explains why the boy dares to use the letter F in his name. Aster recalls that Dallas and Gryan were among those who betrayed him in his past life. Remembering this, he finds it laughable that he once found them intimidating. Now, they appear no more than children playing at nobility. From a brightly lit stage, his sister calls his name, trying to pull him out of his dark thoughts. She grabs his arm and urges him to leave, saying he has already exchanged greetings. Suddenly, Dallas calls her by name, causing her body to stiffen at his attention. With a mocking smile, he asks whether she is still hiding behind her father. He orders her to join them, claiming it is a command from the main house. She refuses firmly, stating that there is no master and servant relationship between their families. Aster stops her by gripping her arm and asks her to wait. Dallas, wearing a cruel grin, asks whether Aster believes he knows something they do not. He proceeds to insult her father, claiming he was a knight who failed to protect the king. He adds that the man accepted the blame and had his arm severed by his own brother. He finishes by saying that he is grateful not to carry a loser's blood. Enraged, the red-haired young woman demands that he retract his words immediately. Acting on Dallas sneers and claims that her father must be ashamed to have a daughter like her. He warns her that this is not a ballroom and that she should control herself. Mocking her further, he suggests she wear rags next time so she will not mind being soaked. At that moment, Aster steps forward and calmly says that he had been worried before coming to the event. He admits that he feared he might feel nothing upon seeing their faces again. With a cold expression, he reaches out and takes a bottle from one of the nearby nobles. He glances at his sister and says that facing them again has actually brought him relief. Then, with deliberate provocation, he tosses the bottle into the air and draws Dallas's attention. The red-haired noble reacts just in time, slicing the bottle in midair with his sword and remarking that it is good to see them again. The liquid drenches him completely, leaving him stunned by Aster's audacity. Sword still in hand, he faces his adopted brother as others shout in alarm. Aster calmly touches a drop of the liquid with his finger, tasting it, and realizes that it is nothing more than grape juice. Wearing a cruel smile, the young man remarks that the drink suits a spoiled noble like him perfectly. The scene then shifts 3 years into the past, where a tense voice urges him to hold on in the middle of a fight. One of his sisters cries out in fear, asking whether he is trying to hurt everyone around him. Golden energy surges violently, spiraling out of control and terrifying the young girls nearby. The power of the 7 wings erupts with frightening force, far beyond anything he had imagined. Watching the scene unfold, the Viscount looks deeply troubled and wonders whether such overwhelming strength can truly be restrained. He questions whether the boy will ever be capable of mastering such a dangerous power. The story then returns to the present as a guard bursts into the Viscount's meeting room with alarming news. The older man immediately asks what has happened. Interrupting an ongoing conference, the guard explains that the children of the main family and the Elmheim branch have begun a duel. Hearing this, the leaders of both families grow tense, their expressions hardening. Without hesitation, the Viscount rises and rushes out to see the situation for himself. Nearby, a noble from the main family smiles with interest, commenting that it is rare to witness brothers of the Elmheim house fighting one another. The Duke and the Viscount observe the unfolding scene, while other nobles watch with mixed concern and curiosity. The Duke smiles darkly, thinking that the festival may soon descend into chaos. Meanwhile, Dallas scoffs and angrily calls Aster a fool for daring to provoke the Duke's house. Dallas then reveals his four-wing crest, making it clear that he believes himself to be on an entirely different level. With contempt in his eyes, he demands that Aster reveal his own crest. When Aster does not comply, Dallas mocks him, asking whether he is too ashamed to show it. With a calm but mocking smile, Aster replies that flaunting a mere pattern is embarrassing. This provocation enrages Dallas, who fumes at the audacity of being challenged so casually. Aster then declares that if he wins, Dallas will apologize to his sister. Dallas accepts the challenge immediately, stating that if he wins, Aster will belong to him like a dog for the rest of his life. Without delay, Dallas charges forward, sword raised, and the duel erupts in the middle of the hall. Steel clashes loudly as their blades collide, but Aster blocks the first attack with ease. Standing firm, the black-haired young man grips his sword steadily, his focus unwavering. Dallas then channels the power of his four-wing crest, reinforcing his weapon with magic. A red aura engulfs his blade as he unleashes a devastating strike. From a distance, Aster's sister cries out his name in fear, anxious about what might happen next. The Duke watches closely, smiling as he reflects that while his son's swordsmanship is lacking, the magical strength of his crest more than compensates. He muses that the power of one wing is like the faint flame of a candle. In contrast, the power of four wings resembles an explosive force capable of widespread destruction. Grinning cruelly, Dallas taunts Aster, asking where all his confidence has gone and whether he still intends to force an apology. Growing impatient, Dallas demands that Aster stop defending and finally reveal his power. He then raises his sword with both hands, preparing a decisive blow meant to end the fight. One of the watching nobles smiles smugly, convinced the outcome has already been decided. At that moment, a golden aura envelops Aster's sword. With perfect timing, he blocks Dallas's attack, and the opposing energies collide violently. Dallas is stunned, unable to believe that his empowered strike was stopped so effortlessly. Smiling confidently, Aster remarks that Dallas talks far too much. He follows up instantly with a precise kick that sends his opponent flying across the hall. Standing tall, Aster radiates golden light, his presence overwhelming. He reflects that he endured 10 years of restraint in the Viscount's house solely to prepare for revenge. His eyes burn with determination as he advances again, launching a relentless series of swift, powerful strikes. Dallas fails to keep up and collapses to his knees, completely overwhelmed. Another brother watches in disbelief, unable to accept that Dallas is being driven back so easily. Suddenly, green and yellow energy bursts forth, blasting Dallas backward with crushing force. In desperation, Dallas shouts that he is a four-wing and cannot be defeated by someone like Aster. Aster meets him with an icy stare, utterly indifferent to that claim, and unleashes yet another devastating attack. The surrounding nobles gasp, wondering if the boy truly intends to win so decisively. Shock spreads through the crowd as people whisper that monsters like this still exist within the Elmheim family. Focused and unrelenting, Aster continues his assault without giving his opponent a moment to recover. Standing beside his daughter, the Viscount watches anxiously and admits that the situation has become dangerous. Dallas, filled with rage, struggles desperately against the crushing power bearing down on him. At that moment, a memory flashes through Aster's mind of being gravely wounded by his own brother. He recalls the man's manic laughter as his relative lay defeated and helpless. Consumed by rage, Aster's eyes blaze as his golden aura surges to an even greater intensity. Dallas screams for him to stop, but Aster's fury no longer responds to reason. From the viewing box, his family calls out his name, begging him to calm down. A massive explosion of energy erupts, hurling Dallas across the hall. The Duke merely watches with folded arms. Aster finally halts his attack and drives his sword into the floor directly in front of his fallen opponent. Dallas lies trembling on the ground as Aster coldly remarks that he should come dressed in rags next time. With open contempt, Aster addresses him as cousin, making his disdain unmistakable. He then turns toward his family in the viewing box, who stare at him in stunned silence. Aster declares that he is no longer the wingless Ash, signaling that his former weakness is gone forever. With a calm, confident smile, he realizes that this acknowledgement has finally brought him clarity. Suddenly, his eyes glow faintly red as he senses a dark and malevolent presence. Looking toward the top of the stairs, he sees a sinister figure surrounded by a deep crimson aura. Horror grips him as he recognizes the owner of that overwhelming power. The man looks down at him with pure malice and contempt. Cold sweat forms on Aster's skin as he realizes that his former father is standing before him. The nobles are still reeling from the shock of seeing the Viscount's youngest son defeat the main family's third heir, but the arrival of this lord casts a heavy shadow over the hall. Feeling the crushing pressure of the man's presence, Aster turns fully to face him. On the ground, Dallas bursts into hysterical laughter, convinced that his father has come to save him at last. Aster now stands face to face with the leader of the Elmheim family, the feared Lord Roderick. Roderick glares at him with fury, clearly displeased by what he sees. Hatred burns within Aster as he recalls the name of the man who betrayed him in his previous life. Meanwhile, the red-haired noble crawls toward his father, clutching at his leg and begging desperately for protection. With tears streaming down his face, Dallas calls out to his father, desperately hoping he will protect him from the black-haired young man standing before him. He points accusingly at the protagonist and claims that he is nothing more than a bastard who dared to challenge the family's authority. In his panic, the noble begs his father to use his power and crush the boy who humiliated him. Without warning, the lord brings his sword down and brutally grinds his own son's hand into the floor. Dallas screams in agony, utterly stunned by his father's merciless punishment. The surrounding nobles freeze in horror, unable to comprehend such cruelty inflicted on one's own child. Even Dallas's brother is left speechless as he watches the red-haired noble's hand being crushed without restraint. The lord coldly humiliates his son, questioning why he dares to cry after disgracing the family name so publicly. Seeing this, the Viscount shouts for his brother to stop and not to harm the boy, but his plea is ignored. The lord dismisses him and declares that Dallas has no right to wield a sword. A suffocating silence spreads through the hall. At that moment, Aster steps forward and blocks his former father's sword as if challenging him. He states firmly that his cousin has yet to apologize to Sister Alphen, as promised. With defiance in his guise, he asks his uncle to postpone any punishment until that apology is fulfilled. The lord scoffs and asks whether the boy truly believes he is an Elmame simply because he was taken in as an orphan. In response, the young man declares that he is the Viscount's son, and that he learned the pride of a knight from him. The lord shows no interest in the answer, and instead turns his gaze toward the nobles seated in the viewing box. He accuses the boy of sullying the main family's reputation through his insolent behavior. He states that this situation goes far beyond a simple disagreement, and that this cannot be dismissed as a childish quarrel. He recalls aloud that the boy's father once paid for his disloyalty with the loss of an arm. The lord then questions the young man, demanding to know what he is willing to sacrifice for his audacity. Calm and unafraid, the boy prepares his answer without hesitation. He explains that this was never a squabble, but a duel, fought to answer insults with steel. The lord's anger flares at the boy's unyielding words. The protagonist then throws the lord's own philosophy back at him, stating that he has no intention of giving up anything. Watching this, Alphen grows deeply worried as her brother continues to stand his ground against their uncle. The light-haired noble remarks with amusement that the boy is only 10 years old. The lord's eye twitches, his fury barely contained as he finally sheathes his sword. In that moment, he makes his decision and orders the boy to take his stance. The protagonist is taken aback, never expecting the lord himself to challenge him. Before he can fully react, the older man charges forward with terrifying speed. His strike crashes into him, shattering stone and carving out a massive crater as he is sent flying. Alphen watches in horror, frozen and powerless to help. The Viscount desperately calls out his brother's name. He leaps forward and attacks Roderick. Their swords collide with thunderous force at the center of the hall. Sparks fly as the two brothers clash, Roderick calmly blocking his brother's attack. When the exchange ends, the Viscount rushes toward his son to check on him. Confusion spreads as no one understands how it happened. Wounded but unbroken, the young man struggles on his feet. Blood marks his face, yet his eyes burn with unwavering resolve. From a distance, the lord watches him with open contempt before turning away and walking toward the exit. The Viscount catches the boy just as he begins to collapse, holding him tightly. With exhaustion clear in his voice, he calls his son's name in worry. The injured boy weakly states that he protected his sister and upheld his promise. Moved by those words, the Viscount praises him, saying that he fought magnificently. Without another glance back, Roderick ascends the stairs, his son following closely behind him. Above, a noble comments that the Duke resorted to a childish method to resolve the situation. He reasons that allowing the boy to win outright would have shattered the family's reputation, making this outcome a compromise. Even so, the young man stood firm before the great lord and emerged as a rising star. Another noble admits he was tense throughout the confrontation, fearing that House Elmame might fracture completely, that an era of upheaval is approaching, one that may tear the world apart. Below, the Viscount supports the wounded boy while Alphen rushes to his side in distress. Some time later, under a clear and sunny sky, several men train in the courtyard outside the mansion. Knights watch with astonishment as the protagonist spars using a wooden sword, defeating his opponent with ease. One knight expresses disbelief at the boy's skill, calling him impressive. Still focused, the black-haired youth continues training as the man addresses him respectfully as young Master Aster. Another knight remarks that his talent is frightening for someone so young. He adds that this is the same boy who crushed Lord Roderick's third son during the festival. His companion smiles and says it is refreshing to see the main family humbled after oppressing others for so long. As he trains, Aster reflects that he demonstrated his strength clearly at the sword dance assembly. He believes that this will silence those who mock the Viscount's house as a disgrace. Still, he knows his true enemy remains the family itself and his former father. That is why he pushed his limits in the duel against Dallas. As he swings his sword, memories of his clash with the Lord surface again. With focused resolve, he admits to himself that he cannot yet defeat Roderick. He understands that the wing crest only measures latent magical potential, and that he cannot fully wield all 7 wings yet. Power without control, he knows, is nothing more than wasted potential. He surges forward once more, charging his opponent with speed and precision. His eyes glow gold as he concentrates completely. With a sharp strike, he snaps the knight's wooden sword in two and shouts confidently, asking who will challenge him next. All the other knights lie defeated on the ground. From a distance, a familiar voice asks whether he is causing trouble again. Alphen steps into view, remarking that he truly has no limits, but adds that their father is calling for him. He agrees and walks toward her, stepping past the fallen knights. As he does, he notices her clothing and pauses, clearly surprised. She turns and asks what caught his attention. He comments that it is rare to see her dressed that way, and asks whether she once disliked such clothes. She replies that balance is important and that he inspired her not to remain unchanged. Confused by her words, he struggles to grasp her meaning. Smiling, she takes his training sword and says that when she returns, he will be spending plenty of time with her. He smiles back, pleased by his sister's resolve, and jokingly asks her to be gentle during their next training session. Later, the boy knocks on the door of his adoptive father's office, excusing himself as he enters. Inside, he finds the Viscount seated behind his desk, his expression grave. The young man asks what he is needed for, and the Viscount simply tells him to sit so they can talk. Taking a seat on the sofa, the protagonist waits calmly, prepared to hear whatever his father has to say. The older man begins by calmly stating that 10 years have already passed since they welcomed the boy into their family. He adds that he originally intended to wait until Aster was a little older before bringing this up. As he speaks, the Viscount places a ring on the table. The boy stares at it in shock and asks what it represents. The Viscount explains that the ring is the symbol of the next head of the Viscount's house. With a firm and serious expression, he says that he wants Aster to succeed him one day. The young man's eyes shine at the weight of those words. The Viscount continues by explaining that their house is currently in a very fragile position, something Aster already understands well. He adds that although they are only a branch of the Elmheim family, they still rule over their own territory and must protect it. Leaving the position of successor undecided for too long would invite instability. The boy then asks whether his sisters agree with such a sudden decision. The Viscount replies that he plans to announce everything at the Knight Academy, where his sisters are currently staying. Aster immediately thinks of his other sisters, Malfa and Kudo, and wonders whether they will hear the news as well. In his thoughts, he smiles faintly and admits that they likely would not be pleased, especially Kudo. His adoptive father explains that Kudo dislikes him simply because he was born a boy bearing the 7 wings. Hearing this, the protagonist suddenly stands up and refuses the offer to become the next head of the family. He explains that he still cannot properly control his magic and nearly hurt his own sister due to his immaturity. The black-haired young man insists that nothing can persuade an angry sister and declares that he is not ready for such responsibility. The Viscount watches his son quietly, his expression calm and contemplative. He then comments that Aster has always made him question whether he was ever just an ordinary child. With a gentle smile, the Viscount says that he originally planned to give the ring as a reward for the sword dance assembly. He opens a box on the table and adds that it seems the boy would prefer what lies inside instead. Aster's eyes widen as he stares at the contents, wondering what he is seeing. The Viscount reveals that the item is the magic sword Gram, a treasured heirloom of their family. He explains that it is the Devering magic blade, the only weapon capable of controlling the power of the 7 wings. He then takes Aster to a forest, saying that the location will suit what he intends to do. The boy asks why they did not use the training hall instead. The older man answers that this is merely a precaution. Recalling that his adopted son has a habit of breaking things during training, he explains that Gram is a legendary sword passed down only to the eldest son of the family. As the Viscount holds the weapon, it begins to glow intensely, radiating immense power. Aster is left stunned, unable to understand what he is witnessing. He notices that the weapon has no physical blade and wonders whether it can truly be called a sword. In response, his adoptive father pours magical power into the hilt, causing a blade of red energy to form. The Viscount explains that Gram is a blade of potential, shaped and completed by the power of its wielder. With that explanation, he unleashes a single strike. A massive wave of red energy surges forward, obliterating everything in its path. The attack creates a violent vortex of air and dust, clearly displaying the terrifying might of the sword. He warns that if the wielder's power is insufficient, the blade will drain them dry, adding that the weapon's history is filled with tragedy. With a serious expression, he then offers the sword to Aster, and asks whether he wishes to try wielding it. Without hesitation, the young man grips the hilt with both hands. A golden aura surrounds him as he channels his mana into the weapon, attempting to form his own blade. The golden energy erupts violently, and he struggles to contain it. He quickly realizes that his mana is being pulled into the sword on its own, without his control. A massive beam of light suddenly shoots into the sky. In the courtyard, knights notice the flash. One of them wonders aloud whether a comet has fallen, while another argues that it looks more like something has been launched upward. His sister also notices the phenomenon, and one of the men asks what could have caused it. Looking up at the sky, she states with certainty that it must be Aster's doing. Back in the forest, the young man smiles while holding the sword and says that the weapon is extraordinary. The Viscount corrects him immediately, saying that the sword itself is not what is impressive. He points toward the sky and states that Aster's power is what truly stands out. The Viscount explains that no one in their entire lineage has ever borne the Seven Wings crest. He believes that once Aster fully masters his power, he will surpass even Lord Roderick. In his thoughts, the Viscount realizes that his adopted son may one day become stronger than both himself and his brother. However, he warns that great power always invites great conflict. He explains that if the world discovers the boy has 7 wings, it will become a serious problem. Some will envy him, others will resent him, and many will seek to exploit or eliminate him as a threat. He tells Aster that this is why he must never regret being weak now, and urges him to grow stronger while he still has the chance. Extending his hand, the Viscount asks him to train without hesitation. The protagonist takes his hand and vows that he will never return to a life of misery. With determination, he thanks his father and promises to master both the 7 wings and the sword. 3 days later, the Viscount's family warmly welcomes new arrivals home. 2 young women enter the mansion, and the red-haired one loudly announces her return with dramatic flair. She spreads her arms wide, clearly thrilled to be back, and asks for a reunion hug from her younger sisters. Instead, the girls rush past her and cling to the white-haired woman, calling her sister Malfa. Left standing alone with her arms still open, the red-haired young woman complains about being ignored. One of the younger girls remarks that she always ruins their hair by hugging too roughly. Embarrassed, the redhead denies the accusation and insists she would never do such a thing. She then notices Alphen standing near the stairs quietly watching. Without hesitation, Kudo rushes over and pulls her into a crushing hug. The pink-haired girl protests loudly as she is squeezed mercilessly. Malfa then asks their father where brother Aster is. The Viscount begins to answer with a gentle smile. Hearing Aster's name, Kudo's expression turns serious. At the same time, deep in the forest, the young man continues his training and unleashes another violent burst of red energy. He barely manages to dodge his own attack, which spirals wildly out of control. Breathing heavily and drenched in sweat, he admits to himself that he still cannot fully control the magic sword. He realizes that while he can form the blade, maintaining its stability already pushes him to his limit. Standing amid the devastation, he wonders what he must do to reach his father's level. Suddenly, a familiar voice remarks that he has outdone himself. Kudo appears, walking toward him. He asks whether she has already returned, and she complains that he did not even come to welcome her home. With a teasing smile, she calls him cold-hearted for ignoring her arrival. She then accuses him of acting special and mentions that she heard about the sword dance assembly. He responds by pointing out that the same could be said of her missions as a knight apprentice. He adds that she was the only one awarded the honorary knight medal that year. Kudo replies that if she could not achieve something like that, she would never be worthy of succeeding their father. She then asks whether he refused the role of successor because of her. The young man internally curses his father for causing confusion and explains that this was never his intention. He simply did not feel worthy of such responsibility yet. Turning away, Kudo begins to walk off, speaking bitterly about their father and brother. She accuses him of being cruel for knowing her dream and still acting the way he did. Completely baffled, Aster struggles to understand her reaction. Without warning, she suddenly attacks, releasing a powerful slash of energy toward him. The strike tears through the air and obliterates a tree behind him. Startled, he narrowly dodges as the trunk explodes. Angrily, he demands to know why she attacked him without warning. She replies casually that since it has been a while, she decided to test his skills. With a confident grin, she warns that next time she will attack with full force. Aster tries to protest, saying that his sword is still incomplete. She counters by asking whether he would give the same excuse to an enemy on the battlefield. The question leaves him stunned. She states that a knight must always be ready and that hesitation will only lead to defeat. She charges again, and he thinks she must be joking. He knows he is already at his limit just controlling his unstable magic. Still, he realizes he has no choice. If she is serious, then he must respond in kind. The siblings' swords collide, energy exploding outward as they clash. As the impact reverberates through the forest, the boy despairs, realizing that she truly intends to take him down. Their clash drove them deeper into the forest, away from prying eyes. From afar, it would have looked as if lightning had struck among the trees, bursts of light flashing between trunks. Kudo clicked her tongue in irritation mid-swing, her blade carving precise arcs through the air, her expression sharp and merciless. She remarked that he remained as skilled with a sword as ever and admitted that she had not expected him to keep pace after her years of growth at the Knight Academy. Even so, he blocked her attacks one after another. She shifted her footing with disciplined precision and unleashed a devastating blow that hurled him backward. She coldly stated that his control over mana was pitiful. Aster skidded across the forest floor, his boots gouging deep lines into the soil. Still, he forced himself upright. Looking at her, he commented that she was just as ruthless as he remembered. His thoughts drifted unwillingly into the past. Kudo had always been this way, fierce and unyielding. As the only male in the family with the formal right to inherit, and as the bearer of a seven-wing crest that surpassed anyone else in the household, he had long been a silent thorn in her life. To her, his very existence embodied unfairness. She had grown into a storm that rose against every perceived injustice. If he were honest with himself, she had always been his natural enemy. Without warning, she leapt high, her silhouette briefly framed against the canopy. He recognized the technique instantly. Her sword fell like judgment. The impact split the forest floor apart, a violent shockwave blasting outward. Standing over him, she declared that he was unworthy of becoming the next head of the family. Elsewhere, inside their father's chamber, Alphen stood near the window. Anxiety colored her voice as she asked whether it was truly wise to allow them to fight alone. She feared that recklessness between siblings might end in death. Their father responded calmly that Aster and Kudo were rivals, perhaps reckless but not foolish enough to cross the final line. Still uneasy, Alphen pressed him and asked why they had truly been summoned back from the Night Academy. She sensed the matter went beyond mere succession. He opened a drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope marked with the insignia of the Elmhine main family. The sight stole her breath. He explained that it was a summons. The elders who governed the family's core wished to see their grandchild in person. When she asked quietly whether the situation was truly that grave, he answered without hesitation that, at worst, they might lose Aster. Back in the forest, the battle raged on without pause. Their swords clashed in rapid succession, shockwaves rippling through the trees. Amid the exchange, Aster insisted that she stop speaking nonsense and reminded her that he had already refused the role of successor. She knew that better than anyone. Irritation tightened her features as she raised her blade high and declared that his refusal was exactly what she found intolerable. Her sword came down with overwhelming force. He caught it at the last second, and the sheer weight of the blow stunned him. Facing her felt less like dueling a swordsman and more like bracing against a troll wielding a warhammer. She pressed down harder, pouring even more strength into the strike. At the final instant, he twisted his wrist and flipped his blade, driving her attack into the ground. He demanded to know whether she would finally listen. She responded with a faint smile and asked if he was already trying to flee. In the next heartbeat, she unleashed her full brute strength. He was flung sideways and crashed into a tree so violently that bark exploded behind him. He coughed blood, disbelief flashing in his eyes. Kudo looked down at him and declared that if all he could do was swing a sword, he was third-rate. Those who relied only on mana were merely second-rate. Only those who mastered both sword and mana together deserved to be called first-rate. She added that she was deeply disappointed. The difference in wing crests, she explained, directly reflected mana capacity. Even a single wing meant nearly triple the power. Though she bore 5 wings and was technically inferior to his 7, he still avoided direct clashes of strength and chose instead to hide behind refined technique. With a faint smile, she asked whether he truly lacked faith in himself or whether he feared losing control again, as he had 3 years ago. Her words cut deeper than any blade. Aster froze as the memory surfaced. Had he been afraid all this time? Had he unconsciously sealed away his own power because of that incident? For the first time, he confronted that possibility. His gaze dropped to his sword as he wondered aloud whether that same suppression was the reason Sordran always felt unstable in his grip. Kudo's expression hardened further. She told him that he possessed everything she had ever desired. If he intended to let those blessings decay through ignorance and arrogance, then he should hand them over to someone who understood their value. She lunged at him, her killing intent no longer restrained. This time, he did not retreat. He met her strike head-on. Their blades collided with a thunderous roar that echoed through the forest. To her shock, she was forced backward, her footing faltering as disbelief filled her eyes. She could scarcely comprehend that he had deflected her full, powered attack. He offered a faint smile and thanked her. He told her that, because of her, he had finally awakened. Then he surged forward at full speed. She narrowed her eyes, confusion flickering across her face as she questioned why he would charge before stabilizing his blade. She wondered whether he was out of mana, though the idea seemed impossible. As he advanced, mana flooded into his sword in overwhelming torrents. The 7 wings on his back concealed a vast, nearly inexhaustible reserve. He understood that he still lacked precise control. Instead of forcing restraint, he abandoned it entirely. For a fleeting instant, he released his reliance on technique and poured every drop of mana into the raw motion of his strike. The blow descended with unstoppable force. She raised her sword and blocked it cleanly, stabilizing herself at once. Even so, she felt the difference. Something within him had changed. After steadying herself, she let out a small, amused smile and asked whether he had truly thought this through, or if this was simply another half-formed impulse. He met her gaze without hesitation. There was no uncertainty left in him. He told her plainly that he had no intention of wasting this second life. This time, he would seize everything that had once slipped from his grasp: the power of the 7 wings, the sword Graham, and his rightful place within the family. These were the things he had struggled desperately for before and failed to claim. At the mention of a second life, she stiffened almost imperceptibly. Shock flickered across her face. In that brief opening he moved. Mana surged violently into his blade as he closed the distance in an instant. He leaped high into the air, gathering every ounce of strength he possessed. His sword was poised to fall with absolute finality. Then he vanished. Kudo's eyes flew open in shock when Aster vanished from her sight midair. For a split second, she thought he had disappeared entirely, but he had not. Instead of rising higher, he had dropped low, compressing his mana inward and forcing it into a tighter, denser flow. The pressure around him thickened as he funneled everything he had into his blade. He announced without hesitation that he would no longer hold back. Kudo felt the change instantly. The atmosphere itself seemed to grow heavier. She understood at once that the duel was reaching its conclusion. Aster brought his sword down with devastating force. The air shrieked as it split beneath the descending arc of condensed mana. Sometime later, Kudo slowly opened her eyes. Instead of shattered trees and scorched earth, she saw the familiar ceiling of her own bedroom. For a few seconds, she could not understand how she had ended up there. Sunlight streamed through half-drawn curtains. By the window stood her older sister, Malfa, quiet and composed. Malfa turned slightly and remarked that Kudo had taken quite a while to wake. Kudo pushed herself upright immediately, her voice sharp as she demanded to know what had happened to the duel and what the result had been. Malfa's smile was gentle. She explained that Aster had carried Kudo back himself. He had told the household that Kudo had fallen asleep in the middle of the fight. According to him, the exhaustion from her journey back from the Night Academy had finally caught up with her, and she had simply lost consciousness. Kudo lowered her gaze to the sword resting nearby. That was not what had happened. She remembered the final moment with perfect clarity. Aster's blade had stopped just inches from her body. She had felt the crushing density of his mana, enough to cleave her in two. Yet at the last instant, he had dispersed the mana coating the blade. Only the residual shockwave had struck her. It had been strong enough to knock her unconscious, but it had not been meant to kill. In that moment, she had understood something simple and undeniable. No matter what he claimed, Aster would never kill his own sister, and yet, for the briefest heartbeat, she had believed he might. A faint smile touched her lips. He was younger than her, and yet he had grown into something infuriatingly formidable. What an unbearable little brother he had become. She rose abruptly and seized her sword, asking Malfa where Aster was. Her eyes sharpened as she declared that she would not accept a duel that ended like that. The next time, they would start from the beginning, both at full strength. Malfa's expression shifted. She informed Kudo that Aster had already left the castle. Kudo froze. Malfa explained that the main house had summoned him, and that earlier that day he had departed alongside their father. Seeing Kudo's confusion, she asked whether she truly had not been told about the summons. Anger flared in Kudo's voice as she demanded to know why no one had informed her. Far beyond the castle grounds, a horse-drawn carriage rolled steadily along a forest road. Inside, Aster sat across from his father in heavy silence. His father explained that the person Aster was about to meet was one of the old lords who quietly supported the Elmine family. Though retired from public leadership, the former heads of the main and branch families, along with the powerful elders beneath them, still wielded immense authority. They no longer stood in the spotlight, but they governed from the shadows. He added that those elders had never once shown the slightest interest in Aster. For them to summon him now, after his adoption, was far from trivial. Aster listened calmly and replied that it was most likely related to the sword dance assembly. He mentioned that he had heard the elders of Elmine valued the family's honor above all else, above wealth and even above life. He stated that anyone who stained that honor would be cast aside without mercy, as though thrown into a beast's cage as feed. His father stared at him in disbelief, and demanded to know where he had heard such an absurd tale. Slightly flustered, Aster answered that he had heard it somewhere long ago. Then, more steadily, he said he was prepared for whatever awaited him, whether punishment or exile. After a short silence, his father asked whether it truly did not bother him to leave without saying farewell to Kudo. Aster smiled faintly and replied that it was fine. Their departures had been scheduled close together anyway. He added that it was probably better if he was not around. Since Kudo disliked him, she would likely feel more at ease in his absence. He continued by saying that, thanks to her, he had finally begun to understand how to wield the sword Graham properly. He could now draw upon the power of the 7 wings more freely than before. With steady eyes, he told his father that no matter what happened next, he should not come to rescue him. He declared that he was ready to survive on his own. His father opened his mouth, clearly intending to scold him for speaking so recklessly. Before he could, a voice rang out from outside the carriage, asking why Aster was acting so dramatic when he was the youngest among them. Aster's eyes widened in shock. Clinging to the side of the moving carriage was Kudo herself, her expression sharp and stubborn. alive with challenge. Without hesitation, she hauled herself inside as though the journey ahead had always included her. Once fully inside, she immediately turned on Aster, her eyes blazing. She demanded to know why he had slipped away without saying a single word to his older sister. Her tone carried anger and disbelief in equal measure. She added that she had heard about the summons from the elders of the main house. She pointed out that such a summons had never once been extended to her or to Malfa, which made it sound less like an honor and more like a threat. Their father's voice cut in firmly, reminding her that she could not accompany them to the main house. He explained that the matter was too sensitive and too dangerous to involve her. Kudo calmly took a seat beside Aster anyway. She replied that she already understood the situation. She knew that their father had called her and Malfa back from the Night Academy to guard the estate during his absence. She stated that she was not foolish enough to miss that implication. Still, her expression hardened as she added that a summons from the main house meant the matter was serious enough to require extreme caution. She revealed that Malfa herself had warned there was a real possibility Aster might not return. Aster brushed it aside with a calm smile and told her she was overthinking it. He claimed he was simply going to talk and would return soon enough. Deep down, however, he understood the truth. There was no guarantee he would come back safely. Kudo suddenly raised a finger and pointed it directly at him. She told him to listen carefully. Blunt and unfiltered, she admitted that she hated him. Aster blinked in surprise, but she did not waver. She said she hated that he was a man in a family where that fact alone granted him advantages. She hated that he bore 7 wings. She hated that he was always treated as special. She hated that he was stronger than his older sisters. She hated that he carried himself with maturity despite being the youngest. She hated all of it. Then her voice softened. No matter how much she despised those unfair advantages, he was still family. No matter how strong he pretended to be, no matter how composed he acted, he was still her little brother. She rose to her feet, proud and unshaken, and ordered him to return properly so they could settle their duel again. This time, she declared, they would begin at full power from the start. A faint smile curved her lips as she added that she would not allow him to escape with such a cheap victory. With that, she leapt from the moving carriage as effortlessly as she had climbed aboard. Startled, Aster leaned out and asked his father why she had gone through the trouble of coming all that way just to say those things. His father watched her shrinking figure on the road with a proud expression and replied that, to him, it had sounded like a proper farewell. Aster's lips curved into a quiet smile. Looking back, he saw Kudo standing in the road behind them, waving boldly at the departing carriage. In his heart, he thanked her, and silently, with unwavering resolve, he made himself a promise. No matter what awaited him at the main house, he would return.